Good afternoon. My name is Sierra Hake. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Professional Learning System Effectiveness Coordinator, welcoming you to day 2 of the Early Childhood Workforce Registry Rulemaking Advisory Committee. Oh, next slide. We have, we're gonna do a little regrounding. So it's gonna look similar to yesterday, but there was at least one person who wasn't able to make it yesterday. And so I want to make sure that we are all coming from the same understanding of what we're doing. So our agenda today is welcome and introductions, about 10 minutes, review of RAC purpose and scope, about 5 minutes, the purpose and need for rule change. This is the wrong agenda. If you could go forward in the slides. I was like, those timings do not seem right. Let me start over. Our agenda today is slide 25. Welcome introductions, only about 5 minutes. Review of RAC purpose and scope and the purpose and the need for the rule changes, about 5 minutes. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time reviewing the one definition we didn't get to yesterday and the last of the 4 rules that we want to talk about. And then at the end, we'll have about 5 minutes for closing and next steps. So today, same group as yesterday, we have Sydney Train, who you'll be hearing from in just a little bit, higher education analyst. I believe John Reeves, Professional Learning System Director, is not here, but maybe popping in a little bit later. Kathy Way, Administrative Rules and Legislative Coordinator, is also not here today. She's traveling. So Kate Dennison, our Government Affairs Manager, is here in place. Kate Rosenberg and Karina Lopez Mendoza are both here as well. Majority of us have DELC backgrounds, so easy to pick us out. And then you'll be able to pick Sydney out in a bit because she'll be doing a lot of the talking. If you have any questions, feel free to message us in the chat. We're all pretty good at technology and helping figure things out. Next slide. So just our protocols again and our norms is that we're centering children, families, and early learning professionals. If you want to share, please raise your hand, come off mute. When you do share, we would appreciate if you shared your name, your pronouns, and the organization that you're representing. Chat is available for questions and comments. We encourage you to have your camera on, but it's not required. We ask that you keep your mic muted unless it's your turn to speak. We ask that everyone is respectful of each other, that we remain focused on the topic or the rule section that we're in. Next slide. And just as an overview of what the overall RAC purpose is, the RAC is a rulemaking advisory committee, a group of people appointed by an agency to provide input and guidance during the process of rulemaking. The purpose, again, is to provide input and advice to agencies on proposed rules, and the function is to review those proposed rules, offer recommendations on the notice of proposed rulemaking. Next slide. So the House Bill 2991 rule ask is for these 4 big rules. The rules 2 through 4 are the ones we talked about yesterday. The first one is what we're going to talk about today, which is establishing consistent standards for assessing the professional qualifications and academic experience of early childhood professionals for purposes of determining the appropriate worker classifications and pay rates for such professionals. Next slide. I'm going to pass it off to Sydney. One more thing I did want to note is that anything that gets put into chat, we're going to read aloud for recording purposes.
Hi, everybody. Sydney Train, she, her. I'm the higher education analyst here at the Department of Early Learning and Care, and I manage the agreement for the Oregon Center for Career Development. Just want to make a note, as I did yesterday. I know we have a couple of people who weren't here yesterday. So before I go into this note, I just wanted to let you know that you can watch the recording. We have that available of the session yesterday. And we do have a place to submit public comment if you had additional comments on those topics that we talked about yesterday that you would like to share with us, and we'll get those. So in thinking about these rules in total, but especially this one in particular, we've kind of outlined a framework for a solution in this rule in a high level. but it doesn't have all the details, as you'll see moving forward. And that's intentional, because if we put it in rule, it has to be that way. And we haven't had a chance to really go into all the details and have additional community conversations and ensure there aren't any unintended consequences from all the small details that need to be figured out. I say small, they're pretty large details that need to be figured out around the implementation of this rule. We did have one definition that we did not get back to. Oh, as a reminder for the reviewing this, we're really asking you to look at any kind of fiscal impact for you or the communities you represent. If the language is clear, if there's an equity impact or any unintended consequences that you can think of. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. This is the definition that we didn't get to yesterday. So this is our last one. It says tribal knowledge and experience, and this is one that is listed in the rule that we'll look at today, so that'll make sense when we get to that part. May include, but it is not limited to, tribal language, cultural knowledge, indigenous pedagogical approaches, indigenous ways of knowing, traditional ecological knowledge, native storytelling, tribal history, expertise providing learning experiences, and a range of early childhood tribal services. So I'll open it up for comments on this definition. Yes, Julie.
Sydney, it was good to thank you for recognizing me. First of all, I'm Julie Seastrom, Hanaskus, Tribal Council for the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayusla, and I'm she, her. And I just want to say that it was good to find this paragraph as I read through the definitions to see the words that are there included. And the only other thing that I don't know if it's something just so that uh, to make some kind of flexibility to it. I don't know if that's something that's um, a concern on an unnecessary concern on my part. But one of the things that I've learned in the short time that I've been involved in the government process is that things change. And so if there can be some flexibility in this. I think if you might be incorporating that in that the first thing you said was that you're trying to get a general framework um, on the books and that the details are not necessarily real tight or a great many of them because then it becomes law. And when it becomes law, then it's a little bit more difficult to have flexibility to it or any kind of changes as time goes by. It's like this works, I think, fairly well for us now. And I think it's probably good. Um, my only other concern is that like I'm speaking from like I said, that as a representative of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayusla Indian tribe, that's one of 9 fairly recognized tribes in Oregon. And because this is Oregon law, I don't know if we have to speak about the 9 federally recognized tribes, or as you have chosen to put just the word tribal, which is more general and more inclusive. So I don't know if that's a consideration or a concern or a need or not. Um, but it was encouraging to see that you're incorporating a respect for tribal knowledge and that you're incorporating it into this value system. That was just wonderful to see and to read. So I thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. I can respond to a couple of those. I also wanted to say that the language that's in here and the language that you'll see later is really heavily influenced to one of the responses that we got back from our Dear Tribal letter that we did to all of the recognized Oregon tribes. We did intentionally, 2 things. This one, we're trying to maintain that ability for flexibility by saying may include, but is not limited to, so that things could be added here. It would need to be a change if we removed things from this list, but we can include more things in the implementation. And then the other piece is that when we look at the language of where this comes up in the rule, the way that it comes up is ensuring that the tribes are able to evaluate what this looks like for themselves and their own tribe and create, some documentation in whatever form they choose to attest to that tribal knowledge and experience themselves, and then submit that to OCCD. So OCCD is not evaluating whether or not someone has tribal knowledge and experience. The tribe is doing that themselves. And I'll get to my other point in a minute. Julie?
Thank you again for letting me speak. I think that that was a wonderful observation on your part. Again, in the short time that I've been involved in the government process from fall 2021 until now, that's something that hasn't come up often, where there's a recognition by the state agencies that all while there are many tribes, all tribes are different, and all tribes are each a nation. And by showing that respect, that's good on your part to show that we make our own decisions as far as the evaluation of whatever tribal knowledge the teacher is coming to bring and that kind of stuff. So that's also wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. To speak to one of your other points, it does intentionally, and this is something that we can think about further in this group, but it intentionally says tribal and not Oregon tribes because we're also moving to make sure that we can accept these professional developments pieces from, and this was one of the rules that we talked about yesterday, from outside of our state. And so with this system, we would recognize documentation of tribal knowledge and experience from a recognized tribe outside of Oregon. Yes, Julie.
Again, that's another valuable observation on your part, and that there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. So you're not only serving us here in Oregon, you're serving you're opening up the process to the whole United States. So that's another good point on your part. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Any other thoughts on this one? All right. And again, if we need to come back, if you have thoughts later, we can come back during this session. If you think of something after we leave, you are welcome to add some public comment as well. Yeah, Julie.
The only word that you might add is ceremony. Somewhere in there, you got tribal language, knowledge, pedagogical approaches, ecological knowledge, storytelling, history, and that kind of stuff. But the only one I think that's missing is ceremony. I
Okay,
don't know if you want to add that or not.
perfect. Thank you. And Kate's taking notes of our discussions here, so we can come back to that when we look through and do some revisions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So this is our last rule that we're looking at, but it is very lengthy because it documents the different types of professional development that we'd like the new system to accept. And so we're going to kind of go through each point in our time together today. But this is kind of the overarching elements. So the department shall work with the Oregon Registry to develop and implement a step-based career pathway system in which licensing serves as the foundational step and higher steps recognize diverse routes for advancing qualifications. I'm going to pause with that one because these are very, wordy. They include a lot of things. So we'll look at just that one first, and then we can move on to the other one. So a couple of points here. It maintains a step-based system, so it's similar to what we have now, although the calculation for how you get to that step will be different. And then making sure that we're still aligning with licensing and the requirements there so that people can use steps to meet licensing requirements, but also being inclusive of different roles outside of licensed care. Yeah, Mercedes.
So this is a question I think it's kind of come to me after marinating. Because this phrase, the department shall work with the Oregon Registry, happens a couple of times. So and we have kind of we have the department, we have the registry, and then we have Oro. So for the registry, I'm trying to understand, is this like an office in the department, an office outside of the department, a group of people, or is this actually saying the department shall work with itself to develop these things?
The department shall work with OCCD is what that should be read as.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, Ty.
I have a question about, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding the language. It's in which licensing serves as the foundational step. What does that mean?
It essentially just means that we are ensuring that there's alignment there, that there is a, we're not going to be out of step. I have a hard time explaining to out of step with what licensing requires, that there is kind of this base set of qualifications that we want to make sure that we're aligned with. It doesn't mean that licensing will be the first step, right? Just like in our system now, we have some steps that lead up to the requirements that are in licensing for different roles. And it doesn't mean that licensing will change to only require the that registry pathway, because right now there are multiple ways to document your qualifications in licensing, and using the registry step is just one that will still remain the same. I don't know if that helps, or if there's a way to make that more clear in the language, because I mean, even saying it out loud, it is hard for me to kind of explain from that, from
Yeah,
that language.
no, I get, and that's why I was like, I asked because I'm wondering about that terminology of in which licensing serves as the foundational step. Maybe have conversation around the term foundational as we are trying to align all systems with what licensing has, because we know right now it's a little bit off. But that, I think that's like the term that's kind of sticking out, where I was like, I'm not sure, because it kind of makes it seem like, and for me and my side, that that it starts with licensing, like you know what I mean, like licensing is,
Yeah,
licensing is the foundational step or the foundation, and then we're building off of that, when really it should be that we're aligning or
yeah.
OCCD with licensing, especially because that's about to change, hopefully, the step thing. So yeah, maybe that term in particular is something we could look at.
Yeah, I think the way we were thinking about it was like it's foundational in that we're basing it on the foundation of those requirements, but I agree it is a little confusing. So we'll look at that. Vanessa?
In that number one, do you mean licensing like childcare licensing, or licensing as in like a behavioral therapist license or something like that? That is where I see the confusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would check with our rules person to think about the need for an addition of that language or not. On the one hand, I see that that would add clarity. On the other hand, these rules live within DELC's rules, and we only
Right.
have that one kind of license. So I'm not sure, just from a
Right.
rules
I just
perspective.
like if I were reading this as an outside person, and or like an outside provider, like if a provider were to read these rules, which I know that's probably not going to happen, but when as a provider, when I refer to licensing, I refer that's childcare licensing, not necessarily a different kind of license.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Other thoughts on this one? All right. The next one says the career pathway system shall allow individuals to advance to higher steps through a variety of recognized activities, experiences, and credentials, individually or in combination, and shall increase in expectation as individuals move through higher steps in the career pathway system. So what this means, many of you have seen kind of the circle, and I think I have a slide with it here in just a minute too to kind of help explain this, but a circle of all the different types of professional development that we want to accept, which we're going to have the list of it soon. So thinking about coaching, mentoring, training, higher education, all those kinds of things. This means that you can pick a variety of those to get your, to move along the pathway. You don't have to have just one, training, or you can pick from different ones. And that to move up the steps, you will need to have more different types of professional development. So we would, while we are going to recognize experience, if you want to get to the higher levels of the step, you will need to have experience and training and mentoring, for example, right? And so one of the things that we'll be thinking about in terms of determining the implementation is going to be, how do we make sure that in rural areas, in languages where there are less resources currently, and all these different situations, that people are still able to access at least the number of those that are required for the steps. For example, like 3, they're able to get to the higher steps because they have access to enough different types of professional development to meet that requirement. Yeah, Julie.
Thank you, Sydney. I just wanted to double check, as far as like the tribal, recognition and that kind of thing, where the tribe is the decision maker, in the, credential process and that kind of thing. Does that carry over to this specific spot as far as, professional development? Like we have, different, teachers within our tribe of languages and cultural processes and that kind of thing. And what they do is they learn from elders and or other tribal members who are lifetime experts at these different things. Are those things considered on your list of PD, or do you have a set list of PD that is concrete, and the tribal people also have to adhere to it?
Yeah, so here is this list here. And it says right now tribal work experience, but it will be changed, the definition. This was kind of a graphic that was developed in the months previous, before a lot of work that was done on this language. And so that is one piece of the pie in this proposed plan, that tribal knowledge and experience that the documentation for that will come from the tribes and how they define that. And tribes can, of course, if they fit within the definition of coaching that's developed, receive credit for coaching in those ways. But there wouldn't in this system be a place where a tribe would tell OCCD this person is a step 7, right? They would still go through the process of looking at these different types of professional development. But again, the registry is also optional. So, I mean, we really want to have people in there. It really helps us to have that information to be able to look at the success of the initiatives that we have at the department. But it is an optional
So
element.
I'm not trying to drive you crazy, but it's just,
No, you're not.
it's a concern for me. Well, I was born and raised here in North Bend, Oregon, and I've been traveled my whole life, and I'm 69 years old right now. My education has, primarily been, non-tribal. I have 4, college degrees, one from the University of Oregon, one from Cranbrook Academy of Art, one from the City College of New York, and one from Long Island University of New York. Bachelor of Fine Arts, Master of Fine Arts, one in education specialized in reading, and one in Master of Library Science. So all that's non-tribal. So that's accreditation in the non-tribal system. And those are licenses and work experience and that kind of thing. That is not so common with the different tribal members that I work beside here, who are working with, as we've said, researching our language, finding it, and then documenting it and recreating it and teaching it to our young children now, and it's coming up. It's been we have 2 teachers that have been working on it their whole life. One her whole life, and the other one is the last like 16 years or so. One of them has, like myself, a non-tribal college background, but the other one does not. And like I said, they have worked with wax rolls to teach themselves. They've worked with books. They've worked with people that had a little bit of the language, that were elders, that were able to keep some of it, and that kind of thing. So it's just, I'm concerned that that they won't be included in this. Right now, you're listening to me and you're including us and that kind of thing. But I just, I want to try to make an entryway into the non-tribal process for the people that come after me who have the tribal experience and expertise so that they can move forward and solidify our languages and be a part of the process, trying to make a bridge between the non-tribal and tribal worlds so that we can work together so that we're not excluded, we're not left out, and whatever we're doing is valued.
Yeah.
So those are my concerns with that. So I don't know how you incorporate that into what you got going on here.
Well, and I don't know the situation of the particular people that you're talking about, and that's one of the things that we want to do is kind of do some user cases and take lots of different types of people and see how they fit into this system. But as an example, I can see this theoretical person that we're talking about having the documentation from the tribe about the tribal knowledge and experience that they have. You were talking about teaching, so they would have some hours of experience as well, and there may have been some sort of mentoring or coaching, or they could take some additional early childhood education training, and then they would be, you know, fully embedded into this pathway.
So if I understand you right, they would need to be doing some non-tribal early childhood classes or training.
They would have to do early childhood education related. That doesn't mean that they can't come from the tribe, but they wouldn't have to do training. They can develop, they can get those things in different ways. So maybe they have tribal, they have hours of experience, and they have mentoring, right? Then they don't have to have any training at all, but that mentoring is related to ECE. So there's a variety of pathways to be able to get to those steps.
So it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yep, it's really a choose your own adventure kind of system.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Ty?
Can you go back to the previous slide really quick?
Yeah, you bet. See if I have the skills to do that. There we go. Oh, nope, too far. There we go.
Okay, so my question or wondering was in the language around, I'm supposed to write it, recognize it. Individuals, sorry, here we go with me. The career pathway system shall allow individuals to advance to higher steps through a variety of recognized activities, experiences, and credentials individually or in combination. So what I'm wondering is about that, how that language actually translates to people who are trying to move through, because like for like step 10, right? What I essentially feel like it should be saying is that in order to achieve a higher step, you should have to have a combination of a few of these, right? It can't just be you have a degree, but you have no experience if you want a step 10. You know what I mean? Because the step 10 is like your bachelor's, right? So you can have a bachelor's degree, but if you've never been in a classroom, you've never been a mentor, any of those things, it kind of reads like, I think we have to look at that and or, right? Again, with the little pieces of language, because you can have a bachelor's degree and get to a step 10, right? But if you have no experience, then and you know, just for the work that we're doing, you really shouldn't qualify as a step 10 just because you have a degree. You did all the book work, but you don't have any experience. And I think the language gets a little hinky with that. And I know just from personal experience of getting to a step 10, like in the oral system in particular, like people were granted it just for having a degree, but never worked in the field. And that is an issue. So I'm wondering if that and or there's some movement on what you're actually seeking or requiring. Because like I said, you can have a master's degree, but it doesn't matter if you've never been in the doggone classroom. You know what I mean? Like as far as the work that we're trying to do and push forward, especially as it pertains to licensing, your activities, your experience, and your credentials, they should all be, you should have to have all of those to achieve the higher steps. It shouldn't be like, or it should just be a requirement. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'll say a couple of things about that. one, it can be individually in the system that we're thinking about now. And again, we still have details to figure out. And so that can look different as we continue to engage on the implementation of this, but can be individually up to a certain point on the registry. So we're also really thinking about those that are, we have a large portion of our workforce that enters into the field for a shorter period of time. We want to move people to be more career ECE folks, right? But we have those that had a new baby and they have a childcare in their home, and then their children go off to school and they decide not to pursue that anymore and go to a different kind of work. And so we have to think about balancing those career pathway folks with the ability to kind of come into the system and serve as part of the system for a while and then leave. And so there is, at some levels of the proposed plan, places where you could have one or maybe just two. And then there is further conversation to have about higher education as well. I think depending on the degree, higher education in the way some of us have been thinking about it could count for multiple things, because it would typically include something like practicum experience, which would be experience in the classroom. It would have many hours of training through the classroom credits. And those practicum experiences also have a mentorship component. So that kind of automatically makes it have 3, although not all of the degrees that are in our list would follow that, right? If you have one of the related degrees, it's probably not going to have classroom experience. And so we will have to look in figuring out the points in documentation, what that looks like. Ty? Yeah.
As you're saying that, I was gonna say, as you're reviewing that, and I'm sure that you probably already are, but as you're doing that part and creating like what's going to qualify and what doesn't, we have to think about barriers, because some people, I'm 27 years in the field, but I have a barrier of getting my master's right now. You know what I mean? And for a lot of people, that's a thing. So that's another piece of it, which is why I think it's important to be explicit about the language, like on that other thing that you showed us, that all of these will work, especially in combination, and not just because you have a master's degree, you're automatically a step 10. I think that that's really problematic, especially right now with what we're seeing. And then I also am wondering about, you guys did mention that these career pathways, like what you're accepting, like you're willing to accept trainings from out of state. Um, does that also, or is there a conversation about extending that to any kind of degrees, credentials, or experiences that come from out of the country? Because, especially, Oregon has pockets of really diverse populations. And like my TA came from Egypt with really what was a master's degree, and they wouldn't accept it. And I thought she should be teaching me, but they wouldn't accept it. So she came in and she was a step 3 when really she should have been, you know what I mean, by what we say our system is. So I'm wondering if that's another piece of the conversation. And, of course, that diversity piece is being able to accept something from out. And that would also attain to like the tribal experiences too. Like who are we, or how do we quantify tribal experience? Like, who are we to be like, hey, because you did that, or because you did it? And I think those are some things that we can include in just having the conversation about releasing barriers and making sure that we are truly inclusive in creating these career pathways.
Yeah, and as you'll see, and I was telling Julie also, we will not make the decisions about tribal knowledge and experience. The tribe will, and then provide us with the documentation that they have evaluated that. So we recognize that we are not the evaluators of that. We are not experts in that area and can't evaluate that. In terms of, higher education, I think that's continued conversations in the implementation pieces. And the way that we are thinking about it certainly is to allow things from out of state. That one rule that we looked at yesterday was specifically phrased as out of state, not from other states, because we are including the international professional development that can happen as well. Mercedes, I think you're next.
Thank you. So I think I had some similar thoughts. So I actually rewrote the statement. So I just put that in the chat. So to begin with, the phrase like shall allow individuals, I think this is the same feeling I was having yesterday with like that phrase voluntary, is that it makes the system too passive. So what I changed there is that the career pathways system sets guidelines for how individuals can advance. I agree with Ty. I don't think it should be individually or in combination. I think it should simply say in combination, because I think even at some of those more entry levels that you're speaking of, or folks who are just beginning, or folks who are not intending to like do this for their whole career, are at least going to be able to say, I've done a training activity and I have experience at my work site. So already they're doing a combination, even if we're thinking about it as just in that more like entry level beginner or smaller scope program. And so I think the combination still works. And then I think it would just be easier to like separate those sentences around the expectations for more. It does make the sentence a little bit repetitive, but I think it helps with clarity. So those are my recommendations.
Thank you. And Kate is copying all of the comments in the chat for us as well. I do want to pause quickly and ask Kate R. or whoever is doing that today. Sierra, are you doing the chat comments? Do you want to read out what we have?
You can read it out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Tiffany had said there's a lot going on in the office today, so mostly be using chat. Based on the need of varied sources, you might consider clarifying that advancement will occur through multiple diverse recognized routes. It may help to note that increases in expectation will be based on transparent competency criteria rather than only academic attainment to ensure fairness across settings. Then Tiffany also shared that they agree 100% with Ty. And then Mercedes put in the language of the career pathway system sets guidelines for how individuals can advance through registry recognized steps through a variety of recognized and approved activities, experiences, and credentials in combination. Expectation for the number and types of activities, experiences, and credentials increase as individuals move through higher steps in the career pathway system.
Thank you, Sierra. Tiffany?
Sorry, it's just crazy. I just wanted to reiterate kind of my agreement with Ty. I see it almost on a daily basis, even with staff and like in my own personal life. I have 20 years of experience, but because it wasn't done in a traditional route, I don't rate as high yet. We have staff members who come in fresh out of college who, yes, have done a practicum, but not directly necessarily related to their work. Not really any experience actually working with other educators and are a step 11, or a step 10, just because they've gone to school. So I think I was really excited when I learned about this whole kind of new development. I'm still very cautious because there hasn't been a whole lot of information given out about it. And so I think there's a lot bigger conversations to have with what exactly this is going to look like. But I think we need to, especially in today's kind of societal information with what's going on with the Department of Education and everything like that, we need to be very cautious of putting too much weight on the degree and the paper because it's not necessarily, it doesn't make or break you as an educator. So I just want to make sure that we're really quantifying that and making that apparent from the get-go.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge that when Heather did feedback sessions on this proposal in the past, that was feedback that they received at OCCD. And so we'll definitely think about that. And also just, keep an eye on your inbox because I will be reaching out to all of you and others when we start thinking about the implementation and weighting and documentation. And we will take all the support we can get because that'll be a very detailed process. So if you feel strongly about some of those things, we would love to have you as part of that conversation. Julie?
Thank you. I agree with Tiffany, Mercedes, and Ty, and I think it kind of echoes in the words that I said previously, where even though I came from all that non-tribal training and background, and I served as a teacher in a private school setting for 6 years and a public school setting for 23 years. So I had both the hands-on experience with the children as well as the families. I was blessed One job was in Honolulu, Hawaii. So the mixed background from my students were Japanese ancestry, Chinese ancestry, Filipino ancestry, Samoan ancestry. When I was in New York City, it was everybody from everywhere. Predominantly Hispanic population in for 10 years in Washington Heights, and African American population in Harlem for 10 years, and then a mix for 3 years. So I was blessed in that regard. But I keep coming back to all the people that, like Tiffany said, she's had, you know, so many years of experience somehow or other to give credit for that. And when we're talking about steps, just double check me on if I understand it. The steps are in relationship to what a person's paid. Is that, you know, if you have a higher step or a lower step, then you're going to be paid more. That it goes back to years of experience. When I was in New York City and in their teachers union, I progressed based on both work experience and education to as high a step as I could. And I don't know if that's what we're talking about when we're talking about steps. Is that?
That's a really good question. So the steps are a system that's put in place in Oregon to just be a way to document the experience, but employers themselves have the choice to determine pay rates. And so there are some that will increase pay rates as people move along the steps, but it is not a requirement. There are ways to become a licensed provider that don't include the steps, but you can use the steps instead of those other pathways that licensing has set aside and set up in rules to become licensed, to meet that level of qualification for licensing.
Because in all that movement from Oregon back and forth to New York to here, some of the credits that I got at U of O that were science credits and acceptable for that degree, New York didn't recognize them. So, you know, what I did when I got there to satisfy the New York requirement was I just took chemistry. They couldn't fight me on that. You know, I mean, I had at U of O they accepted a linguistics class, but New York didn't. You know, so the least amount of hoops and scoop that the different people that are boots on the ground for, you know, 15, 20 years, the better for,
Yeah.
in my assessment. And another one is the least amount of confusion on it as possible. I would go to, you know, the system's office, and there'd be a whole floor full of office people there, and I'd have to go from each desk to be able to get something done. So any way that you know, the less of that, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. We really want to streamline as much as possible. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
take Vanessa and Ty, and then we need to move on to another slide because we've actually done like twice our slide time on this one. So Vanessa.
I just wanted to point out that, like, as a provider and somebody who, like, I rely on Oro. Like, getting that step 10 has been my priority for the last 8 years that I've been licensed. And these rules are not a problem for me at all, because as a provider and somebody who, I mean, I have an associate's degree and I am really close to a bachelor's degree, but most of my Oro training and credits come from community education and my experience. So these rules, just for providers and for teachers and assistants and people who utilize Oro, this just opens it up way more than it has been. Um, and I know Oro has started implementing some of these types of things already. And I know that for a fact because I'm like 9 hours away from a step 10 when I used to be like 20 some odd hours away from a step 10. So I know that Oro is already starting to implement some of these changes and stuff. So as a provider and somebody who works with providers regularly, none of these rules do anything except for make it easier for us.
Thank you. Ty?
I just wanted to make sure that as part of the conversation, you guys go back to review that that there is a fundamental understanding that current grant funded programs do require certain steps that are linked to levels of pay. PFA in particular, I can't remember PSP, but for sure PFA. And then all of that is backed by what licensing requires in order for you to be like lead teacher or sub teacher. So that's all linked.
Yeah, definitely. There are specific programs that link pay and requirements to specific levels. It's just not a blanket requirement from the state. Kate.
And so before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to get us caught up with the chat. Sandy had shared, I agree, it is important to have experience as well as credentials. If you cannot perform on the floor, a degree won't support much. And then Tiffany shared, yes, PSP too, in relation to the last comment.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And we saw this visual already, but just so you have access to that to be able to see those. And now we're essentially going to go through each of those pies. So here's the first pie. For the purposes of advancing to higher steps in the career pathway system, the Oregon Registry shall evaluate and accept documentation related to early childhood education at a minimum. And then we get into the list of all the pies. So let's start with just that chunk of language first, and then we'll talk about the pie pieces.
Can you clarify in this sentence, is the evaluate the documentation or evaluating A through the below?
Is the registry evaluate and accept documentation? Evaluate, that's a good question in that sentence structure. What does the evaluate? The evaluate is evaluating the documentation. So it's evaluating and accepting that documentation. Took me a minute.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this one? All right, I see Tiffany. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to reiterate, I just dropped it in the chat too, so you don't have to read that later, but and this is kind of across all of them, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I just kind of want to reiterate to add the verbiage that you're evaluating based on transparent criteria. I think that's a huge issue right at the moment with how criteria within the ORO system is being evaluated. It's kind of based on the reviewer. There's definitely been times where I have submitted out-of-state documents that were very clearly kind of under one step, and then they came back as another, and it's thrown everything off. So I think we need to make sure across the board on whatever documentation is being requested or required, that it's very clear on what they're judging the standard by.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the one that we talked about yesterday that's blanket over all of these rules, because I think it doesn't just apply to this. I think it applies to the processes for all of these different things. Ty?
Right with Tiffany. That evaluate piece, I'm curious about, again, that term or that language, because I've had the same experience where we'll put something in that clearly fits and they're like, no. So is it that there is somebody who gets to look at your certificate and say, hey, this works? Or is it to trust that the certificate is valid and I did the work and this falls under diversity or whatever? Like we still don't really have that. So if that's not clear, then using that term evaluate maybe needs to be expanded on, depending on what you guys all are going to decide what you're actually doing with the documents that we put in. Because we put in stuff that should work and it's like, oh no, that doesn't. It's like, again, who are you to decide that me taking this 20-hour course in diversity doesn't work? Like, you know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. If that makes sense.
And I do think that goes back to the one that we talked about yesterday in terms of, I mean, that's my intention, is that there be very clearly written rubrics and criteria for all of these different rules, and that those are publicly posted. And so people could have an opportunity to look at those and say, well, you're saying this doesn't count, but using the rubric, I believe that it does, and be able to have those conversations in a really informed way because it's publicly posted and available. Annalise?
Thank you. Hey, I just kind of for clarity, just want to suss out what we're talking about in these rules. So these rules, if I'm understanding correctly, are going to be created to guide what OCCD, Oregon Center for Career Development, does and how they run Oro and how they create their policies and how they build what they do. This is so these are overarching, and a lot of these comments that folks are making today are very valuable. So I'm wondering, will there be an opportunity for folks to then take these comments to Oregon Center for Career Development so that the real change can occur? Because I don't think the real change is going to happen through these rules.
So a couple of things. One, Heather is here, who is at OCCD, so she's hearing them firsthand. But yes, we will have the notes and we can share them, and we are going to incorporate as much of these thoughts as we're able to into the draft rules that come about, and we will be using these as guidance in creating these policies and procedures, and again, also continuing to go out and get feedback. So when we create the draft policy procedures, they're not just going to go up on OCCD's website. We're going to go out and get feedback and have conversation on them before they're posted, and get them to a place where we're making sure as much as possible that they're removing barriers and not having unintended consequences with them. Mercedes?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump back. So the reason I asked if this was evaluating the documentation is, in my mind, evaluating the documentation means like, is there a full name on it? Is there a date on it? Is it not like blurry? Can I verify who the trainer was? But then as we kept talking, it started to sound more like it was evaluating the training and whether or not it counted. Like this was the wrong infant mental health training, so it doesn't count. Versus evaluating the documentation, which to me again is more of like, does this contain enough information to confirm a valid training, not necessarily the content of the training? Because if what evaluate means in this sentence is actually deciding whether or not that training is appropriate, then I think it needs to say that the Oregon Registry shall validate trainings based on published standards and accept documentation, because that's a different activity then than just evaluating and accepting.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. There is a parallel revision of the training and trainer approval system, which is related to, but not this project specifically. So while there is a process for evaluating the content of a training specifically, because that's the system that we have now, this team that would be enacting this would really be looking at, does this documentation demonstrate what is on the rubric? And some of that would be like, for example, once we have the defined terms of what qualifies as coaching in the system, it might be looking to see, like, is the person who provided the coaching an approved coach, like, for example. So in that way, it would be evaluating the content, but it's not looking at the outline of the training or the specific details of the training, at least in not in this process. There is a separate process that does look at some of those things in training, but again, that process is also being revised.
Then I would recommend changing evaluate to verify.
Okay, I like it. Thank you. Julie?
I think if I heard you correctly, you said that this was going to go out for public input, comments, and concerns, and I just wondered how that worked in with the timeline that you shared with us, as far as this needs to be processed by December 31 of this year.
It's tight. Kate, do you want to take that? Because we were going to speak to that at the end. Public comment is actually already open right now, though. But Kate?
Yeah, how about we'll circle back to that at the end. I'll share the process for that. And let me just get us caught up with the chat real quick. Earlier, Annalise shared that is no different. Those links than in K-12, higher positions in schools like being a teacher or principal do require degrees. Tiffany had verbally shared her comment. And then Annalise shared, yes, we agree. Karen shared clear standards that are published, agree. And then Mercedes had shared published standards. So we're caught up with the chat now.
Thank you. Yeah, so we'll come back to that question, Julie, but there is a process to be able to get all of this input and input on a redraft as well. Tiffany?
I was just gonna say, I agree with the change from evaluate to verify. However, I'm slightly concerned just with, and this may be going back to the other day, just how documentation can be provided. Simply because in a lot of situations, or in some situations, there's a lack of like traditional documentation of it. So whether that's out of state and people have moved and lost documentation. So ensuring that, you know, multiple forms of credible documentation, whether that's through employer attestations or portfolios or other evidence, making sure that that is somewhere kind of in this verbiage so that people aren't like, my house burned down and I don't have my certificate and I can't upload it to Oro, that there's other ways that they can show that proof of knowledge.
I absolutely agree with you in the implementation. I would need to think about if there's a way to put language to that effect in here without knowing the details of what that's going to look like. Because again, I don't want to hold us to something that in the end is not what we actually do, because this is like solidified, you know, codified into law.
If you're
But
okay,
I
if I
agree.
drop it in the chat, just kind of an
Yeah.
idea that I was
Yeah,
typing
absolutely.
out to try to
You've had
figure out
some
my
great
words.
additions. I love
Okay.
it. Thank you. All right. I think I'm going to move on to endorsements, but please feel free to add into the chat and or use that public comment option later as well.
Sydney, as a time check, we have about 5 more minutes on this slide.
Okay, so have few opinions on this one. No, I'm kidding. Endorsements. So this is one of the pieces of pie. Endorsements and licensure approved by the department, including, I should probably say including, but not limited to. So make a note of that one. Oregon Infant Mental Health Association, ORIMHA, Infant Mental Health, IMHE, Early Childhood Mental Health, ECMHE, teaching licenses in and outside of Oregon related to the provision of services to children who are 0 to 6 years of age, and those or those in out-of-school time care. And again, we'll make that match what we have in the definitions as we talked about yesterday. And this, again, I think it should say including and not limited to, because we have that circle. The idea is that we leave this open to add things as we identify another credential that makes sense to be in here. Yeah, Ty.
So I'm on the board for REMHA, so I just want to make sure. Because we have an endorsement as an REMHA member, and then we also have the infant mental health, the IMHE endorsement. So would that be, you could get credit for like, you know, is it split? Would it be two separate, right? Where you do get credit for being endorsed by a REMHA, and then you also get credit for being having the IMHE endorsement.
I will be honest, I would need more information to know the answer to that. The way this is written
Yeah.
is that you could get credit for I or II. That the endorsement is created by a RIMHA,
Yeah.
but the credit is for those two listed underneath.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Vanessa.
I also would really like to see including but not limited to, because there are other endorsements and licenses that, you know, like I talked about yesterday, like an ABA license or a, you know, behavioral technician license. Those types of things transfer to early childhood just like these.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was just an oops. It should have had including but not limited to on there. Kate?
Mercedes asked in the chat, is this another space where the out of school time should be up to 12 years old?
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying, Mercedes. I think we'll determine what it's going to be in all those definitions and make it consistent all the way across. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to the next one. But again, if you have more thoughts, you can still share those. Next one, degrees, certificates, and post-secondary coursework credits approved by the department, including, but not limited to, we have to, I don't know why that's not in there, Sierra. Let's think back of why those are not in there. I wonder if it's because, hold on, folks. I think it's because we blanketly said at a minimum. And so that is the including but not limited to that applies to all of them. I think that we were just trying to kind of reduce the repetitiveness in there. So it wasn't an accident. It really isn't there on purpose, but it still does mean including but not limited to. All right. So degrees, certificates, and post-secondary coursework credits approved by the department, including early childhood education, higher education degrees and certificates, without the requirement of transcript review. So what that means there is the college says that they trained people in this topic. They are the expert on the training of that topic. We're going to take their word for it that counts. You know, you have an ECE degree. We believe it's an ECE degree, without looking at the individual courses. Early childhood education related degrees and certificates without a transcript review unless requested by the applicant. And that was put in there because there are instances, well, it could be that if we have a different point amount for a related degree, and if we evaluated their transcript, they actually would have more ECE coursework than the points would be for just that degree alone. And so they could request a transcript review, and the only outcome would be that they would get more points. Ty?
When you guys are putting together like what you're gonna publish as far as so like we have clarity, are you also going to include like the list of related degrees? Like
It's
what
in that
was it
definition
in
that
that
we
one?
did yesterday. And I think that definition also said included but not limited to, and
Okay,
so we could add to it. And yes, it would be published in all of the public facing documents, what is included in there.
okay.
Definitely. Yeah, Mercedes.
So just a curiosity of how this would work, because the early childhood education, higher education definition included just coursework. So it was degree certifications, but then also just coursework. Wouldn't you still want the coursework to have a transcript review then if they didn't actually complete the degree? And since the definition of that includes just coursework,
We'll check on how that connects, because I see
yeah,
what you're saying. Here we only say degree and certificates, but the definition of this includes coursework. That's a good catch. We'll
exactly.
look at that. All right, the next one says individual course credits related to Oregon's core knowledge categories. If the early childhood workforce member's higher education degree or certificate is not in an early childhood education or related profession. So if you're not in that list of things, but you took some ECE courses or some courses related to the core knowledge categories, we'll look at that and accept those, which is true now. Individual higher education course credits related to Oregon's core knowledge categories. So that means the same thing, but it's just kind of that the other one was when they submitted their degree. Then we're going to look at it, and then they can also just submit individual ones. Official or unofficial transcripts may be submitted for unrelated degrees or individual higher education course credit review. So we just wanted to make sure that we weren't requiring official transcripts, that unofficial could be used for those purposes to remove that kind of cost and access barrier as much as possible. And then apprenticeships that support early learning and are approved by the department shall be accepted for Oregon Registry step advancement without review unless the applicant requests an individual review. Again, maybe there's elements of that apprenticeship that go above and beyond what we initially thought of as the elements of an apprenticeship, so they could get additional things. I'm going to look at this comment in the chat
I was just going to read in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tiffany had shared a little bit ago that possibly consider adding to descriptions for verified documents. Verified documentation may include, but is not limited to, transcripts, completion certificates, employer or department approved agent attestations, portfolios, or other evidence recognized by the department. B, the verification process shall ensure equitable access for all providers by recognizing multiple credible forms of documentation reflective of diverse learning and professional experiences. And Sandy shared, point A, I had to get my degree transcript reviewed from the UK, so should this say unless out of state?
No. I mean, let me think that one through. Because there are instances where out-of-country degrees are evaluated and I'm not the expert, and I don't know if Heather can speak to this either because she's also not the one that handles that, but maybe she can. Because when they're evaluated, they are more equivalent to a high school degree. In the case of a UK institution, I don't think that would be true. We would probably very easily be able to equate that to the education system in our state, and we would just say, yes, UK university, you are the expert. You say that this is a degree in EC, yay, we'll take that. But there are some countries where we get, from what I understand, documentation that is called university or some similar name, but it's actually a high school degree in the way that our system thinks about it. And again, not an expert.
That is correct, Sydney. We do get a lot of high school submissions as well as unaccredited trade schools. So we treat them in the same way we would trade schools in the United States. So we just have to be careful about making sure that people who are eligible have access.
So I guess that's to say that, yes, that is a valid point, and I will think through how to include that because those instances do exist.
It might be a general workflow question because since now you're adding the verifying out of state PD, it's kind of like, does that come first and then I don't need it in these individual steps? Or is that process actually embedded in these individual steps? So
Yeah.
it might just be thinking about what the preferred
Okay.
workflow is to kind of figure out that piece.
How those connect. Yeah. Thank you. Tiffany?
I was just going to ask, who's determining that they're not equivalent to the college? Because I'm just trying to figure out that process. If somebody gets their college degree in Mexico and then they come here to the United States and they're like, well, that's not equivalent to our college degree. Who's to say that it's any less? So I'm just trying to figure out that process so that I can understand it.
Yeah, it's not OCCD. There are certified, nationally certified, internationally certified agencies who their job is to evaluate degrees. And so it's them. I don't know what all of their training is, but they have in the same way that I accept that an ECE degree is an ECE degree, I accept that they have national certification to do this work. And so they're using a set of standards that's, common. But that's who it is. It's not DELC, it's not OCCD, it's these national groups, certified groups. And it has to do with like the amount of coursework and the level of coursework. So, if you think about what a high school transcript would look like as compared to a college transcript, that's really what it is. It's not the value of the coursework. It's not what the coursework was or how good it was. It's the leveling of, they called this a university, but it really is a high school in our system. So. All right. I'm going to move to the next one. Early childhood education workforce experience. Early childhood education workforce experience in an early childhood education related profession. Work experience will be reviewed and verified by the Oregon Registry through documentation and process approved by the department. We do not know what that process is. That is probably going to be one of the more complicated things to figure out. It is nationally a goal for people to try and figure that out. So we're going to be Oregon pioneers again, and we will be asking for support from all of you and others to figure out the most fair, comprehensive, and least barrier way to do that. Tribal knowledge and experience. DELC will consult with federally recognized tribes to establish the validation process. So that's just to mean that, we'll ask how we want that documentation to flow back and forth. Individuals seeking recognition for tribal knowledge and experience may request a letter of validation from a federally recognized tribe in or outside of Oregon. So the tribe themselves would create that letter based on the criteria that they determine that shows tribal experience and knowledge, and then we'll work out with the tribes how that documentation, what the requirements of, like, does it need a stamp or a signature or a date or that kind of thing, that then someone can submit to OCCD. Yeah, Julie.
The only thing that's wonderful to see, thank you for recognizing me, Sydney. The only thing that I would ask you to consider changing is where it says DELC will consult with federally recognized tribe to establish the validation process. The word consult, I don't know if you want to extend it to will engage in consultation.
Okay. Yeah.
Only because I think that was made law when the previous administration was in, and as something that it's a nation-to-nation process, with the government of Oregon speaking with each of the individual tribes, and each tribe has a different kind of consultation process, whether it's with the tribal councils at the time and formal consultation and that kind of thing. But I think that someone on your side sending a Dear Tribal leader out to each of the 9 tribes asking just for an initial consultation to share where you're at with this on an introductory level and getting from, like, I'm here today for mine, but their different tribes may have a different way that they would like to engage with the state on this. And so if you could, I don't know if that would be enough, just to say DELC will engage in consultation with the 9 federally recognized tribes.
Perfect.
Or you want to leave it at just federally recognized tribes because you're going for all 574, right?
Well, I think we would probably, that's a good question, because I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we would at the time. I don't think we're going to actively do outreach at this moment to all of those tribes. We'll do that with Oregon, and then as others come in, then we'll have that conversation with each of them, because that would be a lot of conversations to have.
I don't know that you're going to get much engagement from everybody in the
Right.
government work that I've done from, like I said, only from fall 2021 until now. When we have these national Zoom meetings and it's open to everybody, we don't get 574 on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's just the idea that as long as you acknowledge that there's, that they're all there and they're all welcome to be included, that because everybody is understaffed. So it's a matter of who can show up and who can get the message out and that kind of stuff. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. The next one says department approved competencies, including, and again, including but not limited to, implied because of the statement above. The National Association for the Education of Young Children, standards and competencies for early educators, 0 to 3 critical competencies for infants and toddlers, Oregon coaching competencies, and Oregon asks Oregon quality standards and core competencies. Yes, Ty.
On the competencies, and I don't know what the next page is going to say, maybe. Like, I'm from California. Cali has its own set of competencies. and I've been trying to, I have organs and I'm doing California. So if I brought my stuff from California to Oregon, would that count or no? Because the way it's reading, it's like just Oregon.
I think at the moment, what we're thinking is that there would need to be a review of other ones that were included, but once they were reviewed once, they could be added in that pie. But these are the ones that we kind of at this moment in time can say, yeah, we all agree about these. Oregon's been using these. All right, I'm going to move to the next page. This one, again, is another one that we will need to have a lot of conversations. We are not the experts. We got to figure out how we're going to do this, but proficiency in a language other than English verified through documentation approved by the department. We really want to acknowledge the value of those who speak English as languages other than English in supporting all of the diverse students in our state and also in just providing second language exposure to all children. And so it will take figuring out the details of how we do that. But that's something that we're committed to making sure is valued in the system. Mercedes.
Just on that one, wondering if by stating in the rule that it has to be approved by the department, it means that you would have to create your own system and you couldn't say, like if somebody already had a language proficiency that has been reviewed by like the OHA, that wouldn't count because Delk has to have its own approved
No,
process.
Delk could approve that as documentation.
Okay, so this language doesn't presume that you are setting separate standards, even though it says by the department.
I will not be setting separate standards. Let's you know that right now. Julie.
Thank you. I think it's similar but a different question. Again, it goes back to tribal languages. The tribe letter from the tribe will be enough, or the because I'm well, we have 4 languages from our history that have been researched and are living now and being taught now. I don't have the language and I can't speak them, but several of our membership do, and I doubt that anybody on your side could speak or understand any of them. So I'm guessing that am I guessing correctly that it would be a letter from the tribe that would come to you guys and then you would approve it? Or I mean, I don't know what.
In the tribal situation, I think that's probably true. And actually, it's making me think I need to look back and see if language is in that definition, because I want to make sure that that recognition is available in both sections. You know, I don't want tribal language to only get that tribal knowledge and experience slice of the pie. I want the tribal knowledge and experience and the tribal language separate. So I'll check on that too. But we haven't figured out the details. It may be attestation from multiple different sources, just like it would be from the tribes, but I don't know. But for the tribes, I would assume that it's that. We don't have the capacity to have an interview with somebody in all these different languages to make sure that they can speak those languages, right? So it's not going to rely on staff here being able to speak that language. It will be some other system like you're talking about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ty.
You hit on it a little bit already, but as you guys are building that, the term proficiency is something that you should look at, because like you were saying, like who's going to interview in all languages. The other term for this is that verified. And I was thinking of Mercedes and then she commented, not just what that process looks like, but are you actually how are you going to be able to verify, or is it that you're evaluating, right? So maybe those are proficiency verified, and the other one I want you guys to be able to look at is approved by the department. And I know you're talking about you're building it, but those 3, there needs to be like lots of conversation about using those terms, especially as it pertains to trying to make sure that you're including diverse populations and languages other than English.
I will say that the approved by the department is approving the documentation.
Okay.
Rather than approving the person or the language or any of that.
And then in that, in this, we're having the conversation, so now I understand that. But if I'm just reading it, I wouldn't read it like that automatically. So maybe if you have space to include that, even as the definition in this rule, so that somebody else who's reading it has a clear understanding. Because otherwise, I might look at it and be like, oh, there's no way they're going to approve it because they don't speak this. How can they verify? You know what I mean?
Okay.
If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I'll think that through, how we could make that a little bit more clear in there. Yeah. All right. Next one. Certifications, very similar to credentials. Certifications approved by the department, including and not limited to Montessori certification awarded by these Montessori organizations, the CDA from the council, and Waldorf certification from that specific agency. Yeah. Applicants are not required to renew certification in order to maintain an approved career pathway step. So we just wanted to make sure that somebody gets a CDA, they get their steps. If they don't renew their CDA, they don't lose their points and move back a step. That's all that means. All right. Continuous professional development. Early childhood training hours from within Oregon and out of state. Acceptance of series-based trainings may be weighted or prioritized to incentivize scaffolded learning. And all accepted training hours shall contribute to the advancement in career pathway systems. So that last one is in reference to kind of zero set trainings that count for licensing and go into Oro, but they don't move you forward on the career pathway. That's what we're trying to change with that statement. Make sure that any training, no matter what set or if there is sets or however that works out in the training and trainer revision process, will count to move you in your professional pathway. Yes, Karen.
So on this one where it says all accepted training hours, does that mean that there will still be like a standard that we figure out as far as, is there some sort of documentation around the training, or is it that
so the training and trainer approval process is being revised, like I said. And so I don't know the answer to what that's
Okay.
going to look like when it's done. I know in the system that we have right now, there are trainings that are accepted and trainings that are not. And so I'm just like making sure that that's in there because I don't know what's going to happen with this other process.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify. So yet to be determined.
Yes.
Perfect.
Mercedes.
So I'm not sure, but I'm worried about an equity concern with that second one around the series-based training is weighted and prioritized. So if a series-based training, that means that I am signing up for a training course that is maybe every other Tuesday and it's building on itself for a month or 2 months, right? Because I need every other Tuesday. So like I'm doing, 3 or 4 weeks here over a course of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that means in order for me to be able to sign up for a training like that, I need to be working in a setting that has enough of a substitute pool or like enough capacity that I could plan out that far and make a commitment that far and be able to do that. And so I worry about that a little bit. And so I want to make sure that I'm understanding what it is that's being incentivized and how that accounts for providers who are just in tighter ratios and really sometimes have to take the trainings and have to evaluate their capacity to be away from site to do it, where they can't plan out that far with a series that might be happening over the course of months.
Yeah. So yeah, let's think through that. The intention with that one is that we have research that says that one and done training is not as effective as serious training and training with implementation assignments between and coaching and all that kind of stuff. And so that was, we were kind of saying like, okay, you've got this training, but this training is kind of it's more valuable in the system. We are going to value that more in the system and encourage more of those trainings to be available. I mean, I do take your point, though, that there are groups that won't be accessible for. I think in some ways that's unavoidable. Not everyone's going to be able to access coaching, for example. Like or higher education, there are going to be pie pieces that are not accessible by some. And I think the best that we can do at the moment is to make sure that there are ways for people to move up on the pathway no matter their access, that they can access enough of the professional development to be able to move along in their career pathway, until we can make sure that all of these resources are available for people. Like we have all the subs, we have all the scholarships, we have all the access to coaching and, you know, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you definitely on the training side. I 100% we see that in some of the trainings that we do in our programs too, that it really helps to reinforce if you are coming back also to like a similar cohort over time, even a lot of peer learning that happens in that kind of space. So I agree with that. And I think it's just the fact that it's weighted. And so if I work in a work environment that can provide me that kind of consistent time away to do those trainings, I'm going to get further ahead than somebody who's working in a smaller program that can't do that. And that has nothing to do with what I'm actually learning in that training. It has everything to do with the size of my employer and their ability to do that. So that's my concern there. And I agree with you. That's a concern all over the place. That was part of our workforce barrier study was a lot of like family-based small providers saying that it's really hard to get away from the classroom in order to do trainings that are often done during the business day and that wanting more trainings that are outside of those regular hours was a big request from folks. And so I guess I would just say that from then the side of the ledger that's approving these kind of serialized based trainings is there has to be some sort of obligation on them to not just provide them during the workday, right? Or not just provide them in downtown Portland or like things like that, because then this will perpetuate an inequity that's already happening on that side of the ledger.
And we have groups that we have some control over with that, with you know, like the CCRNRs and those, but we also have independent trainers in the system that we have no control over, so we can't change what they're doing. And in some cases, the CCRNRs have kind of union requirements about work hours, but you know, we try to make sure, I know all of them try to make sure that they have access outside of hours as much as possible. And Tiffany and Ty, and then we'll read out Annalise's comment as well.
I'm not sure if this is going to fit in this area or if it's a whole nother topic. But as far as professional development, is there any place that it's discussing the creation of professional development? So as somebody who's a trainer who spends time creating trainings that have been approved through my sponsoring org, even though I'm doing the research and spending the time to do that, even if I'm delivering this training, I'm not getting credit for my own training that I'm creating that is being okayed by my supervisor if it's being put under a sponsoring org. So for an example, like right now, I'm short on PM hours and all my trainings, I've got 60 hours of PM trainings that I give in a, you know, any 6-month period. And I don't have credit for them because I'm the one that created them and I'm the one that's delivering them through cohorts. So is there a place within this system, or it doesn't need to be in the continuous professional development, the acknowledgement of creation and the research that goes into it and the time and energy that goes into the creation of these trainings?
I think that's a good thing to think about. I wonder, just in thinking about it right at this moment, if that goes under experience. Training, because you know, you have classroom experience, you have training experience, because it's still kind of education experience, and we are thinking about this system in terms of technical assistance in addition to like direct classroom workers. I don't know that it would connect to the content of the training, because you're, well, I mean, you might be, but you might not be developing additional knowledge around that content. You might, if you're just
But
using
I'm just,
existing knowledge.
I mean, we have to cite our resources and go through this whole process to actually be able to submit these. And so we're gathering that information and doing the research in order to create the training. So if we are the originator of the creator, there's got to be some understanding that there's hours. When I create a training, it's not a 3-hour training. I'm doing 40 hours plus of research on this topic to be able to deliver it. And then also kind of what goes with it. So I think, yes, part of it is experience, but a huge part of it is professional development because we're spending that time to gain that knowledge in that specific area.
I want to look at something real quick. Is it easy to get to in here? Let me see. I think it might already fit within this definition. Early childhood education, work experience in an early childhood education related profession. Because technical assistant, and I'll check on the list of related professions above too, but technical assistance is an ECE related profession when in reference to ECE. So I think it may already fit in here, but we'll think that through a little bit more. Ty. Oh, actually, hold that thought for just a second, because I said we were going to read out the chat after Tiffany.
Annalise shared, I think the issue being raised is with the system. For example, lots of cohorts exist already, which are series trainings. Instead of restricting the system by rule, DELC appears to be opening up the system. What we need to do is grow the trainings and offerings within the system. Our union offers all our series trainings in the evenings and on the weekends, for example. Ty shared exactly, and we get no credit for that in response to what Tiffany was sharing. Annalise shared, Tiffany, you just need to find a trainer who offers independent study in a particular CKC to get those hours. And there's an active conversation happening now between Tiffany and Annalise, but Tiffany asked, Annalise, I have never heard of that before. And Annalise said, you could engage with and collaborate with the union.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, now Ty, thank you for waiting.
Did I forget my question? No, I didn't forget my question. So I just want to make sure that I understand correctly as far as the acceptance of the series-based trainings and they're weighted and prioritized. So for example, licensing requires 15 hours, right? Every year they have to do 15 hours. So I have a cohort that's 15 hours that hits all of the CKCs that licensing requires, but they're all set one. So when you say weighted or prioritized, what does that mean for like the series based or the cohort trainings? Would it get, I just want to understand like what weighted or prioritized means in that sense.
In this rule, it has no implication on licensing hours. It has no implication on set levels because sets, again, is part of that training and trainer approval piece. This is really only the amount of points that you get, like how many Candyland spaces you go up in your career pathway on your career lattice. Julie.
I appreciate what everyone's saying, especially Tiffany, that I think said it first about the work that she does as a trainer. That is not she's not getting credited for it, and I think that that's something that all of us do as educators. You're constantly learning, researching, and that kind of thing. And I don't know how that they could, all the people who are doing it now could get recognized for it, whether it's monetarily or whether it's step processes or whatever. But she spoke about one training that she provided for however many people, whether it's a dozen people, 20 people, 30 people, 100 people, whatever. But she put in like 40 hours of research and 40 hours of research and the PowerPoints and whatever paperwork that she had for the different people that were attending and that kind of stuff. So if it's possible to credit, the people from now on in some kind of capacity, that would be wonderful. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I don't know if it can be lumped into that one slide where you said like workforce training or something like that. It's a different and separate thing where the person like yourself, you put in, I don't know how many hours to create this whole thing for us today. And so it's similar but different. It's just that it's the teachers as opposed to yourself as a presenter. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Annalise?
Yeah, hey, so just to answer people's questions, other states do this so seamlessly and so easily. The solution is right there, waiting for us to just seize the day. If you are a trainer and you want credit for the hours that you spent in what is essentially an independent study, I would encourage you to reach out to other trainers who are already doing this and it's working. So if you are not part of that trainer inner circle, I would suggest that you become part of that inner circle. I would also suggest that OCCD could look to other states and other registries, and they could address the problem today and put something into place today. It should be a very simple fix, and it is a very simple fix. And this is something our union has been pushing for many, many years, since 2016, at least since I've been here. But if you are a trainer and you are spending significant time developing a topic, that's really a set to skill, and it should not be difficult for you to get training hours for doing that independent, what is essentially an independent study. So.
Thank you, Annalise. All right. I'm going to move on to the
Karen
next.
added in the chat, great topic for the trainer COP. And Ty shared, learning is happening as I spend all the hours to create the training. We should definitely get credit. It makes no sense to spend 40 hours on a training, and then the system says I still need training hours in something I created from scratch.
Yeah. Annalise, this is a little aside, but if you know the secret handshake for the trainer inner circle, maybe you could share that in the chat with everybody.
If anybody wants to just contact me at Oregon CCPT 132, I can tell you trainers who will give you set 1 hours. And if Heather Irwin wants to reach out to me, we can get a set 2 banged out real quick and approved. We could do set 2 training. So, and there are several of us as trainers and sponsoring orgs that do that work. Oregon CCPT 132, I'll drop it in the chat.
Thank you, Annalise. All right. Participation in normalized early childhood education related job embedded and relationship based professional learning opportunities approved by the department, including coaching, mentoring, and communities of practice. I don't think I wrote this one. It doesn't sound like my voice. I think maybe I got some outside help on that one. Thoughts on this one? Yeah, Tiffany.
Just bringing back that use of communities of practice to be more encompassing. Kind of, we talked about it a bit yesterday where it was just a focused childcare network or something of that degree so that it's not limiting to just communities of practice. I know all CCR&Rs do it differently, but there are a multitude of different ways that this works in terms of that education related. And so I just want to make sure that we're looking at the wording for communities of practice as well.
Yeah, and fun fact, Delk is having conversations about making sure that we have a unified definition too. So, Audra.
Is there a specific way that these participations and learning opportunities would be approved by the department? Like, how would that become approved?
Yeah, we have to figure out the details, but it would be some process through OCCD where the criteria were very clearly defined. And so then when the documentation, it would be part of figuring out that documentation process. So there is, like I said, a parallel process of expansion of coaching. And so there will be criteria defined within that expansion of coaching, like that system through Elsie and Delk are working together to determine what the criteria for Delk approved coaching is, and then OCCD is working on how to get those documented in oral. But TBD, we don't know yet.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Early childhood education, career and technical education courses without curriculum review unless requested by the high school or other similar education institution. So similar to the higher education degrees, if a high school CTE program says, hey, we taught ECE, then we're going to say that's great. You are an educator. This has been approved through a system, through ODE already. Thanks, and accept that in the system. Yes, Vanessa.
I have a question going back to the coaching and mentoring. So a lot of us as providers, I mean, outside of CCRNR and other organizations, regularly mentor, especially new providers coming in. Is that something that DELC is looking at too, as like a way to, I guess, give credit for those?
Yeah, none of these would be specific to any grantee. So
Okay.
there are not going to be any of these categories that like only a CCRNR can get credit for. CCRNR
Okay.
person.
Okay. So like if we're like, for instance, I'm a go-to person in my small community of Klamath Falls, especially for newly licensed providers or, you know, people looking to go through the licensing process. So you would just have to reach out to somebody to get credit for that, essentially.
Yeah, there will be some published guidelines on what the
Okay.
requirements and documentation would be, and then you would
Okay.
submit that.
Perfect. Because I know lots of providers that have asked about that
Yeah,
before.
it's definitely a piece that's missing, being valued in the system for sure. I mean, we talk a lot about at the department about like encouraging mentoring in lots of different grants that we have. And so we need to make sure that it's valued in the system too, for sure. All right. That was it, you guys. We did them all. So I'm going to go back in case you have other thoughts before we get into the actual end of the meeting. Yeah, Mercedes.
I was trying to search around real quick just for like the courses of early childhood education, career and technical education CTE. Because do a lot of high schools have one that's that specific? 'Cause I was just looking through the schools that we work with, and most of them are like education, right?
So
Like,
all of the ECE courses at high school fall under the heading. There's a squirrel trying to break into my house. The heading of early childhood career, or they're under the heading of CTE, career technical education, and some of them may be education and have elements of ECE within them, but there are specific ECE ones. So is that your
okay.
point? Like it might be called
Yeah, so
education.
like
Okay.
the one that we work with Portland Public Schools, those students will do like summer internships with us, but I think the program is just called education. And then you can choose a type of program.
Yeah.
And most high school students are obviously doing early childhood because age wise, that's what makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's called early childhood. I think the course is called education. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my only concern is like to make sure that if the high school calls it something broader, but the education experience is relevant,
Mhm.
that doesn't create a barrier.
Yeah, and I work really closely with the person that approves those programs at ODE, and I did have her look at this, but I will bring it back to her with that lens and see if she has some clarifying language to make sure that everything would be able to be included. All right, any other thoughts?
I agree with that because I know, I mean, granted, I I mean, I'm not mature as some people on this call, but it is almost 20 years ago that I went to high school. But it was like my education, like my early childhood education class was just called, I want to say it was like educational training, or maybe it was just a practicum. Like I don't remember, but you went to like the elementary school and you worked in like the K through 3 classes. But I know for sure it wasn't like specifically called early childhood education. So that might be, I mean, granted, a lot has probably changed, and I don't have children in high school yet.
Thank you. Ty.
I just wanted to give an offering. I put my email in the chat for, because there's a bunch of other trainers in here. So if anybody else is having the issues Tiffany and I are having, and you want hours, please shoot me an email and I would love to connect.
Wonderful. Anything else to read out of the chat that hasn't been mentioned?
I was just gonna say that Annalise and Ty both shared their emails in the chat. Tiffany had commented that McMinnville ISD does, I believe that was in reference to CTE. And Karen, even though she said I don't have to read this, hers was called Regional Occupation Program.
Thank you. All right. I am going to start us towards wrapping up. And I can't tell you enough how much I've appreciated all of this input. You know, it's a lot of work drafting these together, and I really want to make sure that we get them right. So I really appreciate you all being in here. And we'll wrap up, and I'll have Kate share again about the stipend if you're taking that, but also about the process if you have further thoughts, and also after we redraft with your thoughts in mind, how you can provide some input on that redraft too. But before I do, Julie.
I just want to say thank you to yourself and to everybody who's on this panel yesterday and today. I couldn't be here yesterday, but I humbly thank all of you for including us, and I wish everybody the best of health.
Thank you. All right. Take it away, Kate.
Okay, well, for being a member of the RAC, you are eligible to receive a $50 stipend for each meeting that you attended. So I'll be emailing you early next week with some forms to fill out and return. And then once those forms are returned, the Delk accounting office will mail out a check to you. If you participated in this RAC as part of your role and job, you don't have to accept the stipend. You can just decline, or if you don't respond to the email, we just take that as you are declining the stipend. As far as what happens from here, the Delk team will take all of your feedback into consideration when making edits to the rule language. And then, Sydney, if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen, and I'll share where the rule information is going to be posted on our website. So 1 second while I get my screen ready to share. Okay, so hopefully you see the Delk homepage. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page where it says rulemaking, this will take you to our Delk rulemaking page. And then from here, if you scroll down to the yellow section where it says proposed rules for public review and comment, you'll see our public comment form is linked here. You can also submit public comment to our Delk Rules Coordinator email. These are all the rules currently that are up that are proposed. And so this RAC was the Early Childhood Education Workforce Registry RAC. If you expand this, this is where we will be posting all of the rule information on this rule set. And so after the Delk team makes edits to the rule language, the final proposed rule language will be posted where it says ELC materials right here, and this will be posted on December 3rd, which is 1 week before it goes before the Early Learning Council. And so that's where you can see the final proposed rule language that will go before the Early Learning Council to vote on. If at that point you see the final proposed rule language and you still want to comment, you can submit public comment to the Early Learning Council to review to consider as part of their vote. And for this rule set, the public comment period ends October 30th. That's different from the Early Learning Council public comment, though, to be clear on that. At this point, you can submit comment up until October 30th at 5 p.m. for the DELC team to take into consideration when drafting the final proposed rule language. And then the public hearing will be October 27th at 5 o'clock. And that's a little bit different than this RAC. This RAC was more conversational. The public hearing, you just come, you say your comment, and the DELC team will just listen and receive your comment. So that's what the next steps are. Happy to answer any questions on any of that. And I can put the public comment form and that rulemaking page in the chat. Let me do that right now. That's all I had to share, unless DELC team, I missed anything.
No, I think that was great. Thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll work on getting all of your thoughts incorporated. And again, I will likely reach back out to you after January when we start trying to implement all this stuff and think about the specifics of documentation and points. And for now, I'm going to take a breath and just calm down for a little bit until the public comment ends and incorporate some of those changes. And then I'm going to take a break again until January. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.